Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us in today's webinar entitled The High Cost of Doing Nothing, Why Sticking with Inefficient System Hurts Your Practice. Just a few housekeeping items for today. All attendees will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. Please feel free to type any questions you may have in the chat. We've got a lot in store for you today, so I encourage you to engage and ask questions to make the most out of this time together. Finally, we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar. I'm excited to introduce you to our presenter and our two Next Tech clients you will be hearing from today. Dallas Logan is owner of Dallas & Consulting Firm and has a robust background in healthcare management and a focus on enhancing patient relations. Her mission is to elevate small businesses and growth-minded practices through innovative solutions. With 15+ years of experience and her role as Chief Operating Officer at ClearSight Center, she is always striving to provide knowledge and advancement to those around her. Jen Rispo-McGuire, who is present for today's webinar but off camera today, is a practice administrator at Burlington County Eye Physicians with locations in both Philadelphia and New Jersey. They have 7 locations with 14 providers, and they specialize in multi-specialty ophthalmology and also have 2 med spas. Jen has over 30 years experience in the industry. Melissa Marr is a practice administrator at Eye Associates of Rowan in North Carolina. She has been with this practice since 2016, and she has over 17 years experiencing managing healthcare practices. Once again, thanks for being here, and we're glad you could join us. Let's get started.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you to the Next Tech team for inviting us on today. I really just think this is an important topic if you're moving forward with Next Tech or not. I'm hopeful that you will be able to take away a few, important pearls, maybe something that helps you manage change or move forward with a different technology. Of course, we're going to be talking a lot about EHR specifically and the high cost of doing nothing. While we were starting this project, I started doing some research, and I wanted to find some different stats, which there's not a ton of specific use case in ophthalmology, but there is a lot of different statistics out there for us about healthcare. One of the first ones, this number's huge, I'm still appalled, but $202 billion is estimated to be lost each year due to inefficient workflows, which can affect many, many parts of our practice. I know that's a huge number and it seems outlandish, I guess you could say, especially to us in ophthalmology, but if we're just a tiny portion of that, just think how much that is per clinic that we are participating in that growing number every year with inefficiency. There was another case study involving implementation of an integrated EHR system, and it reported the payback period of 4 years, which isn't bad. And they also had an estimated return of investment at about 25%. Another study from the University of California indicated that medical institutions are saving up to about $33,000 per year per provider with the adoption of an EHR system. A specific ophthalmology practice did a case study and observed a total savings of almost $90,000 just in transcription cost over a 4-year period following their implementation of an EHR. And then another study was found with a smaller medical practice to generate about $20,000 in net revenue per provider each year, just with improved coding accuracy and provider productivity. So knowing that, we know there is a cost to do nothing. And just staying with the same system or picking the system that works for us, quote unquote, now may be costing us more than we realize. So I want to kind of illustrate inefficiencies. We all know them and love them. We've experienced them either in our own practices or in a different healthcare setting. But I kind of want to move through what some of these are and how they cost us, even the ones that maybe aren't necessarily tangible. So the financial and patient care impact of outdated workflows tend to be things like they create manual or cumbersome processes, they drain our time, they definitely drain our profits, and sometimes we forget, but they drain our team culture. They have a negative impact on our patients in ways we don't always necessarily realize, and they can have a negative impact on our patient satisfaction, not necessarily our patient outcome, but the patient could feel that it affected their outcome. Info doesn't always necessarily get passed along when our systems are inefficient. It's hard to find previous notes in some of our systems. There's always what I call the front desk drama. It's not necessarily with our front desk team, but it's what happens at the front desk, the hub of our clinics. If it's hard to sign in or turn in your medical history, if you're having trouble making a payment, all of that happens in front of everyone. And a lot of that has to do with our systems and just the ability to use them effectively, if a patient can understand how they work. There's easily, my favorite is, hey, here's my medication list. I wrote it out for you because I can't enter it. So it's easy for data to get missed. And then there's just a bad feeling patients have when they can't do something on their own and they have to ask us for help because it's too difficult. And sometimes that, no matter how great our providers are, and we all have amazing providers, that affects a patient's thought on the care they're being given. We don't think that because we know that our providers and our staff are outstanding and they're going to do the best to always take care of our patients. But a patient's perception of our technology is actually still their perception about how we're treating them through their procedure, which is interesting to think of. So some of these cumbersome processes that we know drain our time and our profits. They're areas of data entry, this time it takes in clinic to work a patient up, to enter their information in their charts, maybe to make chart notes post-exam. That really causes an inefficient clinic schedule, especially because we can't predict if our patient will come in with their paperwork filled out, which we all hope they will if we have to have that, or if they won't. And then if they do have to fill out their paperwork in the office, how long does it take them to do that? That was something that was always an unknown at my previous practices, is this patient should be pulled back by now. Why aren't they? Oh, they're still filling out their health history. Can we go help them? Can we move that process along? But what takes one patient 4 minutes takes another 15. And that can really change your whole flow for the day. It can cause our doctors to be inefficient, takes them more time to look up previous appointments, search through data. When they're writing their charting notes, it can take a long time. It can cause us costs because we end up hiring scrubs to help because it's difficult. And of course, there's reporting issues. Some of our systems are not capable of pulling data that can help us in studies, that can help us in marketing. And then some more of the, what I would call hidden costs, things that we can't quote unquote put a price on, is just the first impression quality our patients have when they enter our practice. Are we what we say we are? Do we have the best technology? Well, we probably have the best technology to help them see better, to help them feel better. But what if our technology that helps them through the process is lacking? Does that have an impression on them? Did they miss the time with the front desk to, hey, how are you, Barbara? So glad to see you today, with, hey, we need you to fill out this paperwork. Like, did they miss that fun interaction that we know our team is effective and capable of doing because they have a job to do, which is technically getting the patient to fill out the paperwork? Do they have a lack of confidence in the provider when they go through the system because it didn't flow as they expected it to? Is that going to decrease our conversion rates when we are trying to upgrade a cataract patient or sell a refractive procedure? What we offer is an amazing outcome, but how do we get them to that amazing outcome? Is there a disregard or a situation that causes them just a moment of, ooh, I don't know if this is the right place for me. That didn't go like I expected. Of course, there's the cost, but we don't measure it necessarily in an outcome of negative culture, of the staff disliking what they're using and working with. If we have to train over and over again, or we have a lot of staff turnover, all of us, I know now, have faced the struggles of hiring. and then you want to keep the person you hire. But if you have that turnover and you're retraining and the staff doesn't like the system they're using, but they have to train on the system they're using, it just kind of perpetuates this never-ending cycle that no one enjoys it. Obviously, if we could complete more exams and more post-ops, we'd have less staffing hours. There's negative reviews based on not patient outcome or patient actual interaction with our staff, but if they have a hiccup in some part of our technology or system where they don't feel heard or they don't feel like they're able or capable of doing something on their own, that can end up with a post about a negative review that has nothing to do with the clinic and who they are and how they're going to help that patient. And so, technology and our systems have a lot more impact than I think we typically think they have. And then there's the inability to market. And for all of you who don't know me, I love sales. And so I'm always looking for a way to help increase our revenue. And we think of our CRMs, our customer relationship management softwares, as the only way to do that. But with a really efficient and effective EHR system, we have the ability to pull data from patients and market directly to them throughout your clinic. Perhaps you get a new laser, there's a new lens, there's a new glaucoma treatment. If we have the data and we can pull from that, we can sell to those patients and we can help educate about new things that we're implementing in our practices. So we know all these costs with sticking with our old systems or maybe picking the wrong system because it's less expensive, it just works for us now. Why aren't we making the change? Well, there's several reasons. The first I would say is what I call lizard brain. It's just that we want to revert to what we know. It's a natural human instinct to just stay the way we are. It's uncomfortable to change. And then for some of us, me, and I know many people on here today, have PTSD because we've made a change that didn't go well and it harmed our staff. It was painful to us. It caused lots of extra working hours. And it could have even caused harm to our patients because the day didn't go as planned. And so it's not just us that feels this way. Typically, when we tell our staff we're going to make a change, they all go, "Oh, why? Is this one going to work?" And so I kind of wanted to talk about a few common concerns or misconceptions that we all face when we're talking about making a change to an EHR. This is one of the first things I learned in ophthalmology at my very first meeting. Every class I went into that year, it felt like people were saying, "Hey, what EHR do you have?" And then someone would say, "I have such and such, I hate it." And the next administrator would say, "Yeah, we had that, and then we switched to such and such, and it's just as bad." And it's just that overwhelming burden as administrators that we can face when we make these changes. And so sometimes it's easier or feels safer to not make a change than make the wrong change. So a few things that, I think are easily on top of mind is it costs too much. They're going to be difficult to implement and use. It's going to take so much time. They probably won't work for us, for our type of clinic, the way we run our workflows. We all have nightmares of implementation that didn't go right, being told it was going to go one way and it goes the other. There's always the burden of training. I think that one's a scary one because it falls on the administrators, and we have to make sure it works well and that our staff can use it. And if they can't, then they're complaining and patient wait times are long, and just makes it really tough. There's also I'm going to lose the face-to-face contact with my patient fear. This is one of my favorites because my primary care doctor got a new system, and the PA rolls in her cart one day with a big screen. I think we've all been there. And she starts asking me questions, but I can't see her. She's typing behind the screen. Now, I'm sure this new system works better at some points, but it didn't work for my patient interaction. And I know that's a huge fear for a lot of our doctors, is that they're going to be too busy typing away to actually have a conversation with a patient. And then, I think the clinic breakdown, like what happens when we make the change? Are we going to lose patients? Are we going to lose staff and the faith in us and the change we decided? Jen and Melissa, would either of you like to share some fears you all had before you made your last change to a new EHR?
Sure. I overall, I mean, I think that the biggest fear is obviously your staff. How will your staff, adapt, and how well will they adapt? And I truly believe it's up to the leaders. I mean, I say this to all of my clients and my practice. It's the leaders have to be a cheerleader. You mentioned in the meeting where you go and hear the administrator saying, "Oh, I hate that system. I hate that system." There's no perfect system, but our systems in our practice need to be as perfect as possible. And the leaders within that practice need to be the cheerleaders, and we need to keep the morale up for the staff because change is scary. Change is scary, and however, it's how we present it. So I think my biggest fear was we went live with all three platforms. We did Practice Plus, ICP, and ICP ASC. So my biggest fear was how well were the teams going to communicate? How well were they going to interact together? How much of a morale issue was this going to be? Because the tensions were going to be high. What were some of the things we could do as administrators to keep those tensions as low as possible? So, strategizing for all of that was key to success, in my opinion.
That's awesome. Melissa, do you have any thoughts?
I would say the same. As administrators, we really are the leaders in the clinic, and our staff is going to follow our enthusiasm and or feelings about something. And like everything, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you put a lot of training into it, a lot of building the system to work for you and the way you practice, right? All practices operate differently. So it's really key in building that and setting it up to the way your workflows are, what your staff is used to. It makes that learning process a lot easier, and making them really dive into it and accept it, right? Change is inevitable, growth isn't. So if the staff is just kind of used to that mentality, they accept things a lot easier and kind of get on board and really dive into it.
That's awesome. And that is a perfect segue into the next topic, which is how do we overcome the resistance to change? Because it's natural for all of us. We all feel that way. Some of us are from clinics that are changing constantly. Our docs love fast-paced. They love new stuff. There's other clinics where the doctors steady Eddie, change really affects them. Some are growing faster than others, but it's all of us are in a constant flux of change. Every patient's different. I think that's the coolest thing about ophthalmology. No day is ever the same. But our staff gets in a routine. We get in a routine, and I get up, and this is what I do my job every day. And so that instant to, hey, we're going to change this is immediate, like, oh, do we have to? Don't really want to do that. And so some key tips in overcoming the resistance to change, I believe, are involving your staff early in your decision-making process. So you guys feel like maybe it's time for a new technology, a new HR, gather feedback from each department, what they like now, what they don't like. Ask for their list of dream items or, the unicorn system, what they'd really like to see in their next system. Now, we can't make all their dreams come true, but I think just asking really prepares them for the feeling that you care. They're going to show you and tell you things that you might not recognize, because it's different for someone who uses it in each department in a different way. And it gives you a whole list of things to take as you start your research too, which I think can be super helpful. Something I failed at is we didn't always allow key staff members to participate in demos. And I think just the seeing what's out there sometimes is really helpful for some of those super users or department heads, because when you pick something as an administrative team and you say, hey, this is what we went with, and it's not perfect, because as Jen mentioned, none of them are perfect. At least they know what else was out there. And so that you guys, your clinic staff, your doctors, you as the administrator, whomever made the final decision was really looking out for their best interest. And then the communication constantly about the why behind the change. You know, most of us, our why is always for a better patient outcome, for a better patient experience, for a better experience for our staff. But reminding everyone while the process is taking place that, you know, the goal of this is to reduce the workload, to improve our patient care, to just streamline our lifestyles. Sometimes there is a little bit of pain for the gain, but why we're doing it. Including real life success stories or pairing up clinic manager with another clinic manager, surgery teams, just to hear from other practices. Because, you know, when you're in the mud, you forget that anyone else has been through the mud before. And then, you know, you get head down, and it's really easy to let those negative thoughts kind of wash over you or your team. But to hear from someone else that, yeah, hey, it was totally worth it. Been there, did it, understand your frustration, but the other side's great, I think can always be super helpful. And that's why we're so lucky in ophthalmology to have such a great network and have people like Jen and Melissa that are able to share their story to help us move forward with ours. And then I think just addressing and highlighting the positive impacts constantly. I mean, you both mentioned that a minute ago. No matter how bad it is or how scary it is or how sometimes stressful it can be, that we as administrators and leaders really just put the forefront that, you know, this is going to work, and this is why we're doing it, and we understand you're frustrated, but, you know, at the end of the day, here's the next day, here's the great news. And as we get prepared for that, you know, transition, we have options on how we're going to launch it. And I would love to hear a little bit here in a minute from Jen and Melissa about how they launched the change, because for most people, the PTSD of things that went wrong previously is around the implementation and the actual change. And so how we can do that more seamlessly and, you know, less effect to our team and our patients. And there's lots of different ways. You know, a lot of places would suggest that we train and make the change in stages. I know, Jen, when we were on our call, you mentioned that you guys didn't do that and had really great success with doing everything at once. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, obviously, Next Tech suggested to do it a little bit more spaced out. We, after again making our team part of the process and talking through with everyone, we felt as though doing it almost simultaneously across the board and not having as many systems, you know, overlapping, we felt like we could do it. And we prepared to do it a little differently. So we went live within a week of one another with all three platforms. And we felt as though that was the most successful way. And I mean, to us, it was successful. I think what made it so successful, of course, was the Super Saturday. You know, Next Tech always suggests to do that Super Saturday and a lot of preparation. Though I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, we're not going to do that." I always say to them, "Oh, don't not do that. I think that's important." So we chose to do it a little differently, and you know, it was successful. We decreased our schedule for 5 days. Our doctor historically sees about 110 patients a day, and we only decreased our patient volume for 1 work week.
That's really impressive. And I think you bring a good point. It was what was right for your practice. And by no
Correct.
means are any of us today saying you have to do it this way, but I think it's such a cool opportunity to hear how everyone done it differently. Because Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys staged it out a little farther. Is that right?
No, we actually went live same day, both platforms. Just for us and for my staff, for my physicians, it was easier to not live on multiple databases, not live in this hypothetical world where we were doing double data entry in either the EHR or the PM with claims. So we went live on both same time. The systems are really meant to work together. And so for them to learn them and go live on them together, they got to see that seamless effect. And it worked fantastic for us. We didn't cut our schedule at all. I did bring in live trainers. I chose to bring in a live trainer for those 2 days, go live in the day after, which was key. I had one in the back for the EHR and one in the front for the practice management. And it really just gave another person for the staff to go to if they couldn't get to me. But I really brought them into the implementation of it. while we were building the system out and asking for feedback. And so by the time we went live, I felt like they were very comfortable with the system, and we did great with it.
That is awesome. I believe you both told me you guys preparation was about 4 months before you launched. Does that sound accurate? Am I wrong?
Yeah, about
Yes.
3 to 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So you guys felt like you were really knew your system on top of having trainers to be able to help the team. How many team members were involved in your preparation? Was it mostly you all, or did you involve different leaders?
For me, it was pretty much me until I got everything the way I wanted it. And then I started involving my clinic manager and front manager. And then of course the physician was involved in building some of that knowledge base just on the way he documents, needing some feedback for him on some of those defaults and things like that to make it easy.
I had obviously a team from the ASC. I have our director of nursing in the ASC, myself, and our clinical supervisor.
Terrific. So you got all sides there building it all out. That's amazing. That's a great point. You put all that effort in and you guys put all that time. I assume you would go back after your first couple days, week, have some meetings, discuss, if there were any little tweaks, what went well, what didn't go well with your teams.
Oh, of course. Like everything else we do in ophthalmology, it's trial and error. What did we do well? What could quality improvement? What could we have done differently? What did we take from that we could do better next time? So I think that's what, got us where we needed to be as far as peaked at our optimal efficiency level.
That's awesome. It sounds like you guys both have awesome teams, which makes life much easier.
Absolutely.
So when we're doing these launches into technology, it depends on the system we use, but a few things I always suggest is like over preparation. Virtual training in advance of a launch can be helpful if you can, work through that with your teams. Providing ongoing and comprehensive training. It's not over after the first day. I always like to remind myself because I'm a rip the band-aid off kind of gal, but it does take a little longer than that. Hands-on training, Melissa mentioned, I think that's huge. All of us learn differently. So hopefully if we allow all of our staff multiple ways of training, that they'll pick it up throughout. And then we talked a little bit about super users in the practices. And I think this is so important on any kind of technology, finding team members in each area of the practice that can become the expert. And they don't necessarily have to be an expert in every area of the software or technology or the EHR, is that they're an expert in their area. And they can help provide continuous coaching, training new hires, that they just really take that on, and it gives them a sense of leadership and hopefully worth. And then, really rewarding our staff for those who are doing that, acknowledging, giving shout outs to our early adapters, to those, there'll always be the one that's like, nah, I don't like this. And then there's the other one who's like, hey, we can do this. This is awesome. And really helping pull the ones who are trying to like it, but really promoting those who are. I always suggest considering small incentives for completing training, celebrating milestones with your team, which I'm sure, to not have to cut your day back or to only cut your day back 5 days. Those are huge, and like just really shouting out the extra work. And what are some things that you guys did during implementation and training sections to help keep the staff morale up when you had some hard days?
I spent a lot of money on gift cards.
Yep.
A ton of money on gift cards. I think that we prepared to incentivize the staff, keep the morale up. We definitely budgeted for a lot of, lunches and, just the overall morale, gift cards, and acknowledgement, acknowledging who was rising to the occasion and making that known to the other staff members. I think that the majority of the administrators' time in these type of transitions are spent doing that for a reason.
Absolutely. Being the cheerleader, you said it earlier.
Oh, you're not kidding.
I think it's awesome that you prepared for that in your budget, though, for the rewards. And that's an easy thing to forget because we're so built on getting this out and rolling it out and it going smoothly. That's an easy area to forget if, as an administrator, because we have to do it. So, it's easy to forget that everyone else doesn't have to do it and be joyous about it.
Exactly. A lot of American Express points.
The doctors don't mind that in the
Yeah.
end.
Save your Amex points, I say.
Well, let's talk a little bit about money. What's our real return on investment when we switch to a modern EHR system like NextTech? Some things that really stick out to me are that are going to be our streamlined workflows. We have custom templates that reduce our documentation time. There's automated patient intake forms. There's so much less staff data entry. I really think it's an improved patient experience. They have integrated e-prescribing, so one less place to go. Your doctors live in one home, which typically makes them happy. I think there's a decrease in labor costs when we're more efficient with less data entry. Definitely in different areas, but studies, anything that's pulling historical data, so much improved. You can increase your schedule without increasing the stress load. There's some studies showing that $22,000 to $60,000 is an annual increase in revenue by provider for just reducing their provider inefficiencies. You have up to a 50% reduction in charting time, which equals, of course, more appointments and more revenue, which we all like. And then, NextTech offers really cool partnerships, and one of them is TouchMD. And Melissa, you mentioned your practice really enjoys that partnership. Do you mind telling us how that's improved or what you enjoy about it?
We do. It's a great patient education. So you can assign things instead of giving a patient the entire database of all progressive diseases. You can really limit it to what they're dealing with. You can also have them sign their consents, do their surgery drop schedules, their pre-procedures. All of that information can be given to them through TouchMD, and it really makes it specific to them instead of them having to dig through this huge haystack to find the needle that fits them.
That's awesome. And a lot of practices use TouchMD separately. So I think just any chance you can integrate more systems to one platform makes life so much easier.
Absolutely.
And then, with any new system, any technology, there's the relationship we build because they become our partner as the clinic and that group, or let's say NextTech, join together. And I think that is we can't calculate what that means and what that costs or what that doesn't cost to us, but it has a huge impact in our practices. And Jen, tell us a little bit about your continued partnership with NextTech and the improvements and opportunities that you guys are having with your clinic.
Well, I consider NextTech being almost an extension of our practice. They're so invested in the ophthalmology is a forever changing field. And there's so many things in the pipeline and things are changing every day with our diseases, which means things have to be customized to our system. And I respect the fact that NextTech's always invested in hearing what changes are needed, and that helps us within our clinic. So I think that's one of the reasons why when I did the side-by-side analysis with NextTech and one of the other superior systems out there in ophthalmology for an EMR, is the reason why I went with NextTech, because it's less of a here's our system and this is it. It was more here's our system and we absolutely know that we have areas of developmental need, but we also know we're far more superior in other areas. And they're invested in working with you on that level. I'm very invested in my relationship with NextTech because I feel as though it's important that my system evolves with the systems internally as well as what's going on in ophthalmology.
That's a great point. And Melissa, you mentioned part of why you guys made the change was your old system wasn't evolving. Is that correct? Oh, we might have just lost her. Uh-oh. She'll be back with us soon, I'm sure. A few other valuable return on your investments is your improved patient retention and satisfaction, your improved culture. Those are, some are intangible and tangible, but some very tangible ones are the integrated billing systems, faster claims processing, higher reimbursement rates. There's some studies out there that are showing 5 to 10% in collections increased, which is amazing. There's improved compliance and risk reduction. Reimbursements are increasing, but your penalties, because your systems work better, your coding's better, seem to be decreasing. I know you guys both use, and I hope Melissa can jump back on if she, both use the billing systems. Can you tell us, any, Jen, that you want to share about the billing or the MIPS, RCM, how you feel about that and what's changed since you made the switch to Next Tech?
Well, I think that from a administrator standpoint with Next Tech, the administration and even the billing managers have a better span of control. You have a better pulse in your AR and in your billing department. It's way more transparent. And as far as the entire journey for electronic billing from the surgical center to and the clinic for your surgeries back to the Practice Plus, it's it's far more superior than anything you've ever seen. As long as you're using it properly and everybody is all hands on deck and every component of the practice is doing what they're supposed to be doing, the system can bill cataract surgeries. For example, I billed 35 cataract surgeries this morning for the facility and the professional side within 20 minutes.
Wow.
So the system is capable of doing that because it's just far more superior. It's like a symphony. If everyone's playing their part, then it's going to work. But if you have somebody who, has been there 25 years and doesn't like a surgical planner, well, no, it's not going to work. So everyone has to play their part. And I think that's where the challenge comes into play for administration, right? Because it's a culture thing.
Yeah.
There could be a culture shakeup because you may have seasoned employees and even non-seasoned employees that aren't embracing that change. The one thing you can't do is allow that not to allow you to utilize the system in its full capacity because you're paying for a system that's robust. And if you're not using the bells and the whistles and the components of the system, even one little thing in the system, you're throwing off the entire course of how that system is meant to be utilized. And I think from an administrator standpoint, and even seeing it across multiple practices recently, that's what we're seeing. Administrators not wanting to shake the apple cart, right? Like, oh, well, she's been here 20 years. We're just going to let her do it how she wants. Okay, but she's totally crippled the system. You're now using paper,
Oh, no.
so
We've reverted
it's
back to the old way.
correct. And and listen, I see it all the time. But that's the culture shock, right? You have to be able to elevate above it. And it's kid gloves all the time and doing it with TLC the entire time. So we become really truly the morale boosters, the cheerleaders. And when I say that, I say it all the time. I'm not kidding. We have to go into this really with the mindset that when we come through that door, we have to be the most positive thing walking through that door. If not, you might as well just turn the system off and put it on the sidewalk and let them come pick it up. Like, honestly.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's the frustration. You can feel it, but you can't show it, and the outcomes. So keeping everybody headed in that, you're right, that direction, keeping the positive forward motion, even if it's not the way we used to do things. Um, we love paper. I know we love paper, but ditching it, blessing.
Exactly.
There also, is optimized appointment scheduling in Next Tech, which makes my heart happy. And there's automated appointment reminders. And there are the actual studies on that, if you need a selling point to your doctors, that there's a 10 to 20% improvement in retention using automated appointment reminders. So it's so nice that, again, it's all built in. It's not a third party. We joke about paper, but the cost of paper is high. It's easy to say, hey, it's no big deal, but you buy the reams of paper, you print the product, you have to have the printer, you have to have the ink, you have to have the staff to print it, the staff to scan it, track it, shred it, someone comes and picks up the shredding. So what seems cheap to use our paper or to go back to our old ways, if we really calculate the time and the cost of it, I think it's way higher than we ever anticipate it to be. And you were talking a little bit about how many surgery center or surgery cases you build for, Jen. Something I was really surprised about when we sat down and spoke was, the efficiency gains you guys saw in the surgery center, and you guys do a ton of cases. How is it making you guys so efficient there? What was the biggest change you noticed?
The surgical center application is, in my opinion, the top 3 most superior thing about the system. And it's also the scariest aspect of the implementation, because in an ASC, you're more than likely have nurses that are seasoned. They've been in the industry a long time. They usually navigate over to an ASC atmosphere when they're at the end stage of their career, right? Because they did bedside nursing, they're at the ASC, so they're a little older, they're more seasoned, so they have more resistance, right? So I was a little fearful with that, and they were very, very boisterous about it. And I can tell you that application was so efficient. It is, it, it's it's almost a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer for any surgical center not to have it at this point. We're able to do 30 cataracts, a mix of MIGS, complex, anything to that nature, and premium lenses, and be out of the OR and in another location by 3 o'clock.
Wow.
And it's, and with the way the Next Tech payment system works, the other day I posted a batch and we collected at our front desk over $100,000. So
That's
that's
cool.
correct. So that's a mix of premium lenses, femtosecond laser, copays, coinsurances, and deductibles. So if your internal systems are in place and you're utilizing the system properly, and the eligibility and the Next Tech payment system and the text to pay and the quotes, your aggressive upfront collections is going to increase. It has to increase. There's no possible way it can, and you're going to see such a return on your investment. It's just a no-brainer in the surgical center. I can honestly say, to me, it's one of my top 3 most favorite things about the system.
I love that. I love collecting money. It never makes
Yes,
anyone
me too.
mad.
Me
Um,
too.
Another thing I love about NextTech is it has self-scheduling abilities. Anytime the phone doesn't have to ring and a patient's happy, that makes me happy. I'm one of those people who always wait until 9 o'clock at night to want to schedule an appointment, and then I can't, and I delay scheduling that appointment for an eternity, because when I wake up the next morning, I forget. And so I love the opportunity that we can offer our patients some self-scheduling. There's enhanced experiences with the digital intake and consents. Melissa mentioned that a little bit earlier. There's nothing that makes me as a patient more frustrated when I cannot fill out my documentation. I went to a new practice the other day and I could not get on the online portal, and I was so annoyed. And so then I think about how our patients must feel if we ask them to fill out the same form on paper, or we hand them a complex iPad to use, or we send them a link that they can't get into. So it's super huge that it's easy for patients to use, that they don't have struggles with it, that the consents are easy to sign. And then, I mentioned earlier the inability, like an inefficient system does not allow us to market to our patients. But with this level of reporting for our patient engagement, we basically can data mine all different types. And there's, you mentioned ophthalmology is changing so fast. There's new procedures all the time. We're buying new technology. How are we educating our patients what our practice offers? If we can't data mine who we might want to send that email to based on their clinical outcomes. We can search through and direct our search for patients of a certain age, patients with previous history of this or that, and let them know that we have a new dry eye treatment, a new glaucoma treatment, whatever the case may be. I think that's huge and just a great way to increase revenue and give patients better care. There's other long-term cost savings with making the decision to pick the right EHR. It's not always the cheapest EHR early on. I know as a young practice, a lot of us make the decision to keep our overhead costs low. But we have to think about if this is going to be the right decision for us long term, excuse me. Even if it's cheaper now, is it going to be cheaper in the future? Are these new systems or the system we have now or the system we kind of pick prepared to scale as our practice grows? Or are we going to outgrow it too fast? We talked a lot about our fear of change, but we also have a fear of overspending. And so we really have to level where we're headed as a practice versus where we are and make sure the technology we're purchasing is going to grow with us, because limiting the change in our staff is always a huge thing, I think, if we don't have to change all the time. And, slowing down for 5 days one time in 5 years or slowing down for 5 days every other year, it's a big difference for our practices.
Absolutely.
Of course, I made fun of paper costs, but we've all been there. We've always seen the paper piling up. Those are some long-term costs. I appreciate Jen and Melissa both being on, because these are true success stories from Next Tech, which I think are awesome. And you guys both did a ton of research and due diligence in making the change. Do you have any other advice either of you would like to share with people considering making a big technology change and switching to an EHR like Next Tech?
My advice would be to embrace the fact that the change needs to happen first, and do your due diligence. Know the key players in the game. And in ophthalmology, I think networking is key. I think that we're very fortunate in ophthalmology to have the networks that we have to make us successful. I don't think I would be where I am today if I didn't have the networks that we've created in ophthalmology through the academy, through all other Next Tech, all other vendors. So know the key players. If 80% of the industry happens to be on a specific EMR, think about the networks and the phone a friends that you'll be able to have. How many times you have to phone a friend, hey, what's going on in our system? Just at Edge this past weekend, we had our laptops outside on the deck, comparing systems, like, oh, you have that? This is great. I think that looks great for our practice. Nobody wants to reinvent the wheel. We really don't. We have so much going on in ophthalmology, that I think that strategizing on, who's doing what in the industry, do your due diligence, and don't be scared. Listen, at the end of the day, it's going to have to happen. It's the inevitable. Just don't be scared.
That's awesome. I am sure many of us will want to call you for that pep talk at some point in time when we are scared.
Oh gosh, I hope I'm not as sick as I am today, Dallas, when they call.
Well, we're sure appreciate you being on, even though you're not feeling great. And Melissa just texted, they have lost power, unfortunately, at their clinics. Of course, as an administrator, she has ran to try to fix everything and be the hero. And so she apologizes for having to jump off, but we know she's taking care of everything with her team. Just to recap, modern efficient systems like Next Tech are going to boost your profitability. They're going to improve your patient satisfaction. They optimize your workflows, and they're going to lower your cost, and they're going to give more efficient and successful patient care. We know that there's so many different items that are actually a return on investment. It's sometimes hard to mentally say, I'm going to make this much if I do this. But don't forget all the untangible items like your team's culture and patient reviews that may or may not be affected, and just patient frustration by our old systems. We get easily frustrated by them, but we forget that our patients also do too. So the cost. I question, what your next steps are. If it's making a change to a new technology, making a change to a new EHR like Next Tech, we are lucky to have such an awesome network in ophthalmology, and we have some meetings coming up, but I know the Next Tech team is happy to pair you with, someone like Jen or Melissa to help give you, their version of what happened and how it worked for their clinic. And I love that you guys just went to Edge and had that opportunity to say, hey, this is working over there. Maybe we should try it over here. And I do think that's a really cool part about Next Tech is they're constantly trying to evolve and take great use cases from other practices and share that network wide to make it better for everybody. I'm going to open it up if anybody has any questions that we could help answer.
Thanks, Dallas. So we had a few questions come in. The first was, what were some signs that your EHR was not working for your clinic anymore?
That's a great
question.
one. Why I was an administrator, we had paper charts for a very long time. And the first sign, like this is silly, but we were running out of places to put paper charts. Like we'd move them to storage and then you'd have to go get them. And like that was our first sign, obviously. And our second sign was nothing was quick anymore. And as we grew, we knew we needed to be quicker and faster and be able to help our patients. And everything we were doing seemed like it took longer and longer. Jen, what about you? What was the reason you knew you needed to make a change?
I would say my first sign to changing to a new EHR was my previous EHR just was no longer evolving. It was not as robust as it needed to be for a practice my size, spanning across 2 different states, having 2 surgical centers, med spas, a mix of optometry, ophthalmology. It just wasn't capable of giving me back the things that I needed to, run my practice.
Yeah,
So it was time. It was time for me to look for another system.
that's awesome. I think growth is a great time, if anytime you have a future and you have a plan is a great time to like, what are going to be the next steps? And growth propels us forward typically. Sometimes we wait a long time to do it, but it's a great excuse to get to take those next steps. Do we have any other questions today, Lauren?
Yes. So the next question is, what other EHRs did you look at besides Next Tech?
That's a
I
great one.
looked,
Jen, you want to take that one?
sure. I actually looked at quite a few, but it came down to ModMed and Nextech. I think that that's the majority of us that come down to Emma and ModMed is a great system. I mean, it's a good system, and Nextech is a great system as well. So it really comes down, for me, it came down to those 2 systems, and I ran a 12-month analysis. Now that's pretty extensive and probably overkill, but for me, it was because both systems didn't have a superior ASC module. So I needed to wait it out till they perfected that because they were both in the midst of working on that. So I had to see what was going to be the outcome there. But I did a lot of really unconventional things in that 12 months. I mean, I called ModMed as a mystery support ticket, and I called Nextech as a mystery support ticket under 2 of my friends to see what their response was on their support level 1 because I have a huge practice. My staff's going to have to call support all the time, and that's huge for me. That's a time is money. It's $20 a minute in the ASC is the average cost.
Wow.
So you want to make sure if they're going to call support that they're going to be, capable of handling that. So there were some unconventional things we did in that 12-month period of time that made me decide to go with Nextech. So mine came down to those 2 systems.
That's awesome. And I think that's the decision for lots of other practices. I mean, depending on our size, there are some smaller options. And I know we looked at some historically and made different decisions and have kind of mixed and meshed and done lots of different things over the years. But it's watching Nextech grow has been really cool over the years. And I think you waited, which was what was right for your practice. Some people are like, hey, I know they're going to do it, so I'm going to jump in and it'll get there when it gets there. But I love that you said unconventional, but you phoned a friend and got the information you needed, which is amazing.
Well, these are things I think that we tend not to think about. And then when we go live, the first time we make a support call, we get frustrated. So I had the time and we were like, okay, well, let's see what this looks like. Let's see what that looks like. And, we don't always want to go by what the next tech salespeople tell us. We want to go by what our peers tell us.
That is awesome. Well, great review from you that you tried it out and chose Nextech. I think we probably have time for one more question, Miss Lauren. Do you have anything for us?
Yes, and the final question is, what is one thing you would have done differently when making a change?
Well, I will take this one. We made a decision based on COVID and training and stress and kind of reverted back to our old ways. And I really wished that we would have held strong and maybe ripped off the Band-Aid, because as the practice grows, at that time it was, it didn't seem like that big of a deal at that time to hold and pause. But as the practice grows and the future continues, there's always a what if we would have, what if we wouldn't have been scared, or what if we would have powered through, where would we be now? Because now there's another change in the future. And so as an administrator, it seemed like the right decision at the time, and it probably still was the right decision at the time. Knowing though that there's another change always coming is sometimes hard too. So, for me, maybe slowing down and making the right decision the first time would have been better for the practice than having to make multiple decisions over a few years. What about for you, Jen?
I think after hosting multiple practices at my surgical center and practice over the last year, I think we've had 15 so far come through. I think I would have wanted to do a site visit. I think if I would have done anything differently, it would have been take my core staff to another clinic and did a shadow at a site. And that I would say that would have been a little bit more beneficial for us.
That's great advice. And I think all of us want to come see your clinic now that we know how many cataracts you're doing in a day. So
Well, all of you can come.
that's awesome. Well, thank you all so much for taking some time with us today. I know the Next Tech team is here to help with any questions you have. I'm obviously available if we want to talk about how to help make the transition smooth and work through culture and promote that idea that change is good for us, even if we don't like it. And I'm sure Jen would be happy to answer any questions. And apparently we will all be visiting her soon.
Sure. And Dallas, thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. We wish Melissa was still with us because she has been awesome. And I know that she would be an expert in, discussing how they implement it at their practice too. And I wish she could have shared, some more of her success stories, because it seemed like they had a really great outcome.
Thank you.
Lauren, do you have anything to finish this up with?
Oh, thank you everyone for attending, and we appreciate your time today. So have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Lauren. Have a
Thank
good one.
you.
Bye-bye.